It's happening right this moment, somewhere in the world, perhaps just a short distance away, or maybe closer than you realize, right near your core. Someone is making a decision that concerns you. A quiet, invisible determination. There's no argument taking place, no significant conversation unfolding, no explanation being offered, just a profound internal struggle. You might sense it, that inexplicable pull, that sudden gap opening up, that emptiness between messages. Yet this isn't indifference, nor is it absence. It's movement, a shift you cannot observe, but somehow feel. This individual stands at an internal crossroads, and although they remain silent, their soul is speaking about you, about what you've touched together, about what might have been possible, or perhaps still could be. Carl Jung once observed that encounters are destiny, but not every meeting automatically leads to togetherness. Sometimes courage is required, sometimes honesty, and sometimes it simply hurts. Whatever is unfolding within this person, you are woven into it. And this changes everything, because no genuine connection ever remains without consequence. Now begins a journey into the invisible, into what lives between two people, even when neither speaks. It's curious how some of life's most significant decisions aren't loudly announced, but made in the shadows. No conversation, no eye contact, no farewell, and yet everything shifts. This individual, whom you might love, miss, or simply cannot comprehend, is currently making a determination. Not through words, but through thoughts, through emotions, through sleepless nights. It's a decision that affects you, though you'll never be informed of it. Perhaps they're hesitating. Perhaps they keep cycling through the same memories. Perhaps they're imagining what it would be like to return or to leave definitively. And you only feel the silence. But silence is never neutral. Silence is a space where something grows. Sometimes hope, sometimes fear, sometimes clarity. Carl Jung said that what you suppress returns as fate. This decision, as quiet as it may be, will have consequences for them and for you. One doesn't decide merely with the mind. One decides with their entire lived experience, with old wounds, with unspoken yearnings. This person stands at a turning point. You are not forgotten. You are right in the middle of it. And the silence, it is part of the decision. Picture a fork in the road, but not on a country path, rather inside a person's being. Two directions, two possibilities. One leads toward you, the other away from you. And there this person stands, trapped in stillness, internally torn. You don't see it, you hear nothing of it, but a battle rages, because deep within them lives a conflict that words often cannot capture. The desire for closeness collides with the fear of disappointment. The longing for connection meets the need to protect themselves. The heart pulls in your direction, the mind warns. Perhaps you've already sensed that something isn't right, that something is stuck, that something unspoken stands between you. It's precisely this internal fork in the road where decisions are born. Slowly, painfully, sometimes unconsciously. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This person isn't fighting against you. They're fighting with themselves, with old patterns, with previous injuries, with images of love that never held what they promised. You've become a projection surface, not because you're wrong, but because you've triggered genuine feeling, and that creates fear. At this crossroads, more than just the next step is being decided. It's being determined whether someone is ready to follow their own heart or to run from it again. Many people believe silence means indifference, but often the exact opposite is true. Silence doesn't arise from emptiness, but from being overwhelmed, from fear, from uncertainty, from too much feeling. When someone who is close to you suddenly becomes quiet, there's often an internal storm behind it. Thoughts that tumble over each other, emotions that find no path, words that wouldn't be enough or could destroy too much. One doesn't remain silent because they feel nothing. One remains silent because they feel too much, and because they don't know whether their own heart is safe in the proximity of the other. Carl Jung understood the language of the unspoken. He knew that where love rules, there is no power. Where power rules, there is no love. Many people have learned to remain silent in order not to be vulnerable. They protect themselves behind the wall of distance in the hope that no one sees how much actually lives there. Perhaps you know this. A message remains unanswered. A gaze averts. A conversation ends before it begins. It feels like rejection, but it's often a silent cry for safety. This person's silence is no sign of absence. It's a protective mechanism, a way of holding themselves when everything becomes too much. You've touched something in them that is bigger than words, and precisely because of this, they lack exactly these words. Silence is not the end. It's the expression of an internal struggle. You might think you're just a memory to this person now, a chapter that has been closed, something that occasionally flashes in thoughts but has long since faded. But that's not accurate. You are not the past. You are a presence, an internal movement that remains palpable to this day. You've activated something in them, and that cannot simply be taken back. It was too real, too intense, too honest. Some people carry the image of another not only in their head, but in their nervous system, in dreams, in sudden feelings, in moments of solitude, in songs, scents, memories that wash over them like waves. Carl Jung said that encounters with another's soul leave traces that no mind can erase. You weren't simply someone, you were a mirror, and this mirror showed something that previously lay hidden, not only about you, but about themselves, about their fear of closeness, about their longing for genuine connection, about old wounds that haven't yet healed. Therefore, your impression hasn't disappeared. It reverberates in moments of silence, in questions that find no answer, in decisions that cannot be made. You are not merely a memory, you are an internal presence that has brought change, whether they want it or not. And this is precisely the reason why they cannot simply continue as if nothing happened. In almost every person who feels deeply, a battle rages at some point. Heart against mind, closeness against fear, longing against protection. This person, who perhaps misses you but doesn't write back, who looks at you but says nothing, lives precisely in this internal field of tension. The heart calls out. It remembers the laughter, the depth, the quiet connections between you that no one else understands. It knows that there was something, and perhaps still is, but the mind, it is loud. It recalls everything that went wrong, earlier disappointments, the risk of losing themselves again. It paints pictures of pain, loss, and failure. And these pictures hold the steps back. Carl Jung wrote that thinking is difficult, therefore most people judge. But here it's not about judgment. It's about the fear of betraying oneself when one feels again. Because feeling means being vulnerable. Perhaps you've sensed it, these sudden approaches, followed by withdrawals. A sentence full of warmth, and then days of silence. A look that searches, and then eyes that avoid. It's not inconsistency, it's survival. The heart wants to move toward you, but the protective mechanisms pull back. And in this back and forth, a person loses themselves, not knowing what they truly want, only that both hurt, approaching and withdrawing. Old wounds don't heal through avoidance. They heal through being seen, understood, felt. But many people carry their injuries like invisible armor. They believe if they don't show them, they'll stay safe. Yet the opposite is true. What we don't integrate, we project. Carl Jung recognized this. He said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This person carries something within them that you've touched. Perhaps it's an old fear of abandonment. Perhaps a deep mistrust that genuine closeness exists. Perhaps simply the pain of never having been truly held. And now you've come into their life, and suddenly all of this surfaces. You haven't caused it. You've awakened it. And that's why the reaction is so strong. It's not truly about you. It's about what you represent, about what you awaken, about the confrontation with themselves that your presence demands. Many people flee from this confrontation, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They fear that if they truly let themselves fall, no one will catch them. That's the wound, and it speaks louder than any word of love you could say. Trust is not given. It's built gradually, through actions, through presence, through the courage to remain when it gets difficult. But this person stands at a point where they must first learn to trust themselves before they can trust you. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, those parts of ourselves we suppress because we consider them unworthy or dangerous. Many people carry a shadow that whispers to them they are not enough, that they don't deserve love, that they will ultimately be left alone. And when someone like you comes along and sees them, really sees them, this shadow becomes loud. It doesn't want to be seen. It wants to hide. Therefore, the withdrawal, the silence, the distance. It's not rejection of you, it's flight from themselves. But running away doesn't heal, it only postpones. And at some point, this person must decide whether they want to continue fleeing or whether they're ready to face what lives inside them. Whether they're willing to do the inner work that genuine closeness requires. Somewhere between fear and longing lives a space that many people never dare to enter. A place where one must be completely honest with oneself. Where one can no longer hide behind excuses, distractions, or old stories. This person has reached this space. They feel you, even when they don't speak. They carry you within them, even when they withdraw. But what now? Carl Jung said that the decisive question for a person is whether they are related to the infinite or not. This sounds philosophical, but it means something very practical. Are we ready to grow beyond our limitations? Are we ready to let go of the small, safe version of ourselves to become who we could truly be? This person stands precisely before this question. With you, it wouldn't be about playing it safe. With you, it would be about truth. And truth demands courage. It demands that one shows oneself, vulnerable, imperfect, human. Many people aren't ready for this. They prefer comfort over depth, familiarity over growth. But you are not someone who accepts half measures. You are not someone who hides. And this person senses that. They sense that with you, it would be all or nothing. And that creates pressure. Not external pressure, but an internal knowing. Either I step forward now, or I lose something that might never come again. Time doesn't stand still while someone decides. Life continues, feelings change, opportunities close. Many people believe they have endless time, but that's an illusion. Every decision has its moment, and when that moment passes, something shifts. Carl Jung recognized this. He spoke of the kairos, the right moment, the moment when something is ripe. You are such a moment for this person. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Not because you promise everything, but because you demand honesty. And right now, in this very instant, the decision is being made. Not loudly, not visibly, but internally, where all true changes occur. Perhaps this person is writing in their mind the words they'll never send. Perhaps they're imagining scenarios that will never happen. Perhaps they're already mourning something they never dared to begin. Or perhaps, just perhaps, something in them is opening. A willingness to try, a readiness to risk, a quiet knowing that some connections are worth the fear. The fear of loss is stronger than the fear of the unknown. That sounds like a paradox, but it's a psychological truth. As long as someone believes they can keep everything suspended, keep all options open, they postpone the decision. But the moment they realize they could lose you, not in some distant future, but now, in this moment, something changes. Suddenly the question is no longer whether they should dare, but whether they can afford not to dare. Carl Jung wrote that what we resist persists. This person has resisted long enough. They've pushed away, suppressed, rationalized. But you haven't disappeared. You've remained present, in thoughts, in feelings, in the quiet knowing that there was something between you that doesn't simply dissolve. And now that they sense you might truly be moving on, that you're perhaps no longer waiting, the dynamics shift. What was once a theoretical question becomes an existential one. Not what if, but what now. Often one only understands what truly matters when facing the threat of loss. Not because they were manipulated, but because the fog of suppression clears. Carl Jung said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by becoming aware of the darkness. The possible loss brings this darkness forth. Suddenly the person no longer stands between maybe and someday. They see what they could lose, not only you, but also the chance to be authentic. And then indecision becomes restlessness. Silence becomes internal noise. Distance becomes longing. Sometimes it's not your closeness that moves someone, but your absence. And precisely when you begin to let go, they sense it now. It's getting serious. Now a decision is needed. The question is no longer just whether you'll stay, but whether they're ready to hold you. There are two kinds of pain, the one we risk and the one we endure because we didn't dare. The person who doesn't decide often believes they're protecting themselves from pain. They think, if I don't choose, I can't lose anything. But that's an illusion, because not choosing is also a decision, and it brings with it a pain that is quieter but lasts much longer. Regret. Carl Jung wrote that pain wants to be lived. It is part of the whole. Many people fear failure so much that they'd rather not begin at all. But what they overlook, the price for inaction, is not security. It's the constant question, what would have been if? This question gnaws. It doesn't let go at night. It resurfaces years later when one sees someone who loves as they themselves never dared. Perhaps this person thinks of you and feels both, the fear of failing with you and the knowledge that it would hurt to never have truly known you. You are not a fleeting thought. You are a decision point, and every soul knows, genuine encounters don't knock forever. The pain of trying is real, but the weight of regret, it accompanies one for a lifetime. And sooner or later, everyone must ask themselves, do I want to risk courage or bury my heart? Many believe they can gain time by postponing decisions, but life doesn't wait, and neither do people. Not deciding doesn't mean remaining neutral. It means allowing life to decide for you, through loss, through distance, through what one hasn't done. This person, who internally hesitates, remains silent, withdraws. They perhaps believe they haven't decided anything yet, but that's a fallacy, because every hesitation has an effect. Every missed response, every unspoken thought, every choice not made shapes reality. Carl Jung wrote that the unconscious lives and acts, even when you don't notice it, and thus inaction also becomes action. You are not frozen in time. You continue moving, internally, emotionally, perhaps also externally, and at some point the energy of the connection changes. What was once open closes. What once called becomes still. Not deciding is comfortable for the moment, but it has consequences. People sense when they're not being chosen, and they withdraw, not from pride, but from self-respect. The decision may not be spoken aloud, but it happens through what is left undone. And sometimes, the silence is more final than any clear no. Love is not only feeling, it is a decision, and even more, it is an attitude. Many people long for connection, but only few are willing to bring forth the emotional maturity it requires. Because genuine closeness means taking responsibility, not only for the other, but for oneself. This person stands precisely before this threshold. With you, it wouldn't be a superficial game, no projection, no pretending. With you, it would be real. And that requires something not everyone is ready to give: presence, honesty, and internal coherence. Carl Jung wrote that relationship is the reflection of internal development. What we seek externally often shows what is lacking within us, or what is ready to grow. A mature connection demands courage to show oneself, even in weak moments. It demands that one not only talks, but acts, not only promises, but stays, not only loves, but also carries. Perhaps this person senses precisely this, that you don't walk halfway, that you don't need masks, that you're ready, but only if they are as well. And precisely there, the internal pressure begins. Because maturity cannot be faked. One cannot pretend in a connection that demands depth. Going with you would mean loving as an adult, and that means taking oneself seriously, and you equally. Genuine connection is not a romantic ideal. It's a daily act of maturity. There is a point at which the internal struggle no longer remains quiet, at which the suppressing, the doubting, the silence becomes too heavy, an internal turning point. This person has carried all of this within them for so long. Feelings that weren't expressed, desires they didn't allow, fears that paralyzed every decision. But no person can live forever in a state between holding on and fleeing. At some point, something tips. A dream, a song, a moment of stillness. And suddenly, something breaks open. The truth pushes upward. Carl Jung wrote that people need difficulties. They are necessary for health. That may sound paradoxical, but this internal pressure, this emotional chaos that is no longer controllable, it is healing because it forces confrontation. Perhaps this person is beginning to be honest with themselves, not because it's easy, but because there's no other way anymore. The excuses no longer work. The suppression no longer protects. You were the trigger, but the movement happens within them. A turning point is not a loud moment. Sometimes it's only a quiet realization. I cannot continue like this. And then change happens, not always in your direction, but always in the direction of truth. And that is the beginning of something genuine. In the end, only one thing remains: clarity. After all the silence, the internal struggle, the unspoken emotions comes the moment when everything sorts itself out. Not always loud, not always dramatic, but palpable, final. This person has lived through you. You were more than a phase, more than a thought. You were a threshold. Now it will show whether they find the maturity, the courage, and the readiness to truly meet you completely, or whether they withdraw because the internal work you trigger demands too much. Carl Jung said that relationship is a process of individuation, a mirror in which one recognizes oneself. You held up this mirror to them, and now they will decide, not in words, but in actions, not in promises, but in presence. Perhaps they will be there, clear, present, ready, or they will remain absent. And that is also an answer. But whatever happens, you remain with yourself, because this story has also changed you. You no longer wait for salvation from outside. You are not a supplicant, but a person with depth, with dignity, with a heart that has learned to remain true to itself. The final clarity doesn't come because you demand it. It comes because you've let go, because you no longer fight, but trust. And sometimes that is precisely the moment when everything turns.